I spoke about herd mentality as it applies to politics, and I posited the question, which I'll now answer. Question: are Americans willing to be led by nonconformists? Answer: yes. And let me use history and some logic to build that up. Look at your political nationwide presidential history. And almost alphabetically, I'll go OPRST, with influential candidates who were not part of the establishment, nonconformists. Now, I'm content that voters want them, that voters rarely have a choice because within the two big parties, and unfortunately they have been the only realistically electable parties thus far, that can change, but within those two big parties, the nominations tend to go to the conformists. Support strongly can be for the nonconformist, and let me give you some examples. Obama, and he did get the nomination. The establishment in 2008 was behind Mrs. Clinton, but in the general election, a majority of voters, even a majority of white voters, voted for Obama over his fairly established opponent, the military service white older guy, John McCain. Next example, Perot. Ross Perot in 1992 came from nowhere without a huge amount of money. He had decent money. He had good media at the time. That was 4 networks, but he had good enough media to rise in the first place. And in a general election where there tends to be only 2 and only 2 realistic choices of winning, Perot got nearly 20% of the vote. Among independents, those not affiliated with a political party, Perot got nearly half of them. Remarkable. Next, R stands for Reagan. Ronald Reagan was the outsider, both in 1976 when he did not beat the established Gerald Ford, sitting president, and in 1980 where he won the Republican nomination and beat the establishment for the presidency. Reagan was not part of the Republican establishment himself. He was the California governor who had gone against many of the East Coast Republican orthodoxy. S&T arose in 2016, and that would be Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. Both non-establishment, both able to rock their parties and able to command huge audiences from independents and even from the other party. Look, take a look at polling, which wouldn't come in the election because you can only vote for one person. Polling of people who said prior to the 2016 primaries, who's your first choice? And when the first choice was Donald Trump, who's your second choice was often Bernie Sanders. And the reverse was true too. Among those for whom Bernie Sanders was the first choice, a sizable number for them, second choice was Donald Trump, both of whom were there to rock the establishment. So the sentiments among Americans for non-establishment are very strong. That's a good thing for third parties. And let me conclude with that term, third party, which, though it might not be the technical term, it is, I think, the best term for, in America now, the Constitution Party, the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the Reform Party. Some states might call them minor parties. I don't like minor and major because the average voter doesn't apply those terms. But the average voter, as I said, might apply underdog versus establishment, ins versus outs, So we do have, when terms are uncertain, the latitude to define things for ourselves and to some extent influence others by using these terms. I like the term third because third, as I said earlier in this video, has an element of insurgency, has an element that for people who like the underdog, it is, I think, an attraction. Third party applies to many parties, so it allows anyone in fourth, fifth, or sixth to still use that term. And third, as opposed to first and second, exemplifies where you can go and still have a good clan. I'll give you maybe my favorite term, but I think it's further away from being used. Tight party. Tight in terms of cohesion among its members, and tight, hopefully, for its values. Narrow, unlike the big tent, they even call it, parties, where if you're part of them and you're voting for their candidates, you're almost certainly compromising some major values because they try to appeal to half or even more of the electorate. Tight is my favorite. If you like insurgent, new, young, all are good. And by the way, all would correspond to our espousing ranked choice voting. I'll get to that in another video. I'm Mark Stewart.